All right, so I will just go ahead to introduce our keynote speaker. And like I mentioned earlier on, the very purpose of having a distinguished keynote speaker to kick off the week is to get practical experience or real life experience from people that have walked through the path of developing the society through their innovation and through their business acumen and through their ability to sustain a legacy of development generally. And like I mentioned, we've had two wonderful keynote speakers in the past. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Carole Nakhle. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the last name correctly, but I just, I would allow you to correct me later. She is the founder and chief executive officer of Crystol Energy, United Kingdom. And Dr. Carole is an international authority on global energy issues. And I've read a lot of her work, especially in the fields of hydrocarbon finance, market development, policy, governance, regulation, fiscal regimes, and contractual arrangements. She's one of those very few people that manage to combine scholarly rigor with practical hands-on application of energy policy. She has a unique breadth of experience, having worked with some of the leading organizations around the world. She has worked with oil and gas companies such as Statoil, and at the executive levels of government. She's worked as a special parliamentary advisor to the government of the United Kingdom. And of course, she's worked actively in a number of international organizations, think tanks, and currently she's been serving as a member of the governing board of the Natural Resource Governance Institute, which we know is one of the important institutes that designs guidelines and documents on how to measure resource governance and the applicable laws and policies around the world. She's also a member of, she's a member of the Audit and Finance Committee of the Natural Resource Governance Institute, and of course serves on the boards of several other organizations, including teaching executive sessions at the extractive industries, on the political economy of the extractive industries at Columbia University in New York, United States. She is well known for founding a not-for-profit organization known as Access for Women in Energy, which aims to advocate for gender justice, gender equality for women in the oil and gas industry. In addition to the work that she's done with the OECD Policy Dialogue on Natural Resource Development, she has taught a number of courses as a faculty member at the Oxford University, the School of Government there, the University of Surrey in the UK, and the EU Institute in Italy, as well as the St. Joseph University in Lebanon. Dr. Carole is an active commentator, regular commentator on energy issues worldwide. She has appeared on Al Jazeera in Qatar, on BBC, on Bloomberg, on CNBC, CNN, France 24, Sky News, amongst others. And she's often quoted in leading newspapers such as the Wall Street Journal, and has been interviewed a number of times. And like I said, I've followed our work very keenly, and I've listened to some of our interviews, and they have been very inspiring in terms of analyzing issues relating to fiscal governance in the oil and gas sector. She's an author as well, and she's published a number of books, including a book known as Petroleum Taxation, Sharing the Wealth, which was published by Routledge in 2008, and is often very cited by industry experts. She's also authored another book known as Out of the Energy Labyrinth, which was co-authored with Lord David Orwell, the former Secretary of State for Energy in the United Kingdom. Dr. Carole has worked on energy projects in more than 45 countries, and she's been visiting different parts of the world. I can't recall whether we've ever welcomed her to Nigeria, but I guess we hope to be able to do that as well when this pandemic goes away. It would be wonderful to have her expertise in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. She's fluent in Arabic, English, and French, and she has received a number of awards for her wonderful work in this field. She received the Honorary Professional Recognition Award from the Tunisian Minister for Energy and Mines and Renewable Energy. And you can follow a lot of her work online on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and on our website. Today, she will be speaking to us, most importantly, in addition to all the wonderful things she's done, she's been able to sustain the legacy of our company, Crystol Energy. And when we're talking about business development, I think it will be there could be no other better person that can talk to us about our experience starting a business, running a business, and doing these other wonderful things, teaching, and doing like almost everything really. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Carole. And without much ado, I will pass on the floor to you. Thank you very much, Dr. Carole Nakhle.
Thank you very much, Professor Babalola, distinguished faculty members, the Vice Chancellor, and all the distinguished participants. Thank you very much for having me with you today. And to answer Professor Babalola's question about two questions. First of all, about coming to Nigeria. I mean, I am embarrassed to say I've been to many countries around in the African continent, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and around Nigeria, but I haven't had the chance to go to Nigeria yet. I really hope that once this dreadful pandemic is over, you will find me knocking on your doors. I just miss really flying around, particularly to Africa. And the second thing regarding my surname, for those of you who speak Arabic, it's pronounced Nakhle, and it actually means palm tree. And the story I know from my family is that during the Ottoman Empire, and Lebanon was part of it, the ancestors of my father's family, they were all tall and slim, but they couldn't pronounce their surnames. So the governor there used nicknames to designate, for example, somebody from my father's family. So they used the term Nakhle because they looked like palm trees. And that's how Nakhle became a surname that stays with us today. I mean, we do a little bit look like palm trees, but not quite. It's really a great pleasure to be here with you today. And I'm not using just sweet words. I tell you why I'm saying this. I mean, of course, it's always a pleasure to interact with students from other universities around the world. But I've been giving presentations. I mean, 1 week, I don't recall how many webinars sometimes I give, sometimes several ones in one day. And they are mostly on energy-related issues. So what's happening in oil and gas markets, the global economic outlook because of the pandemic. But there were very few instances where I gave a presentation on my own, career progression, Crystol Energy, all these, the business, the hardcore business development issues. And I tell you why I'm actually grateful for this invitation, because it actually makes me think about areas that you tend to take for granted or you tend to overlook. So it's a very healthy exercise for me to be able to share with you my own journey with Crystol Energy. I am an economist by background. So I studied in Lebanon. I'm Lebanese originally. And then I moved to the UK in 1998 to pursue my postgraduate degrees. But when I went to the university in Lebanon, I studied economic science. And then I went to the UK originally for 1 year to do a master's in financial services management. Then don't ask me why, but I wanted to do something more, like further my postgraduate studies, and I want to do a PhD. And I was particularly interested in energy economics. Especially, I mean, I didn't know a lot about the energy field, but when you come from a country like Lebanon, which was, and I was born during the Civil War, which lasted over 15 years approximately, you experience all kinds of energy poverty, the issue of energy access. I mean, for us to have electricity was like a big thing. It was a big party. And then really today, lots of things we take for granted, we didn't have back then in Lebanon. So studying, I developed particular skill of sculpting candles, because I studied a lot at candlelight, no electricity. And even hot water, we take it for granted today. So if you're living, especially in Europe, for instance, or any rich country, it takes you maybe 10, 15 minutes to get ready to work. But when you live in a country where you don't have access to basic things, such as basic energy needs are not satisfied, you don't have access to hot water, then to get ready is really a major undertaking, especially if you wake up on a cold day in winter and you need to get to school. The other thing, so that's what made me actually particularly interested in energy. So I knew I had the economics background and the financial background, which gave me a broad understanding of macro developments, business developments, finance, but I wanted to zoom in on a special sector, and this is how I chose energy economics. So I directed my attention on the area of energy. And I have to say, I tried many ventures before setting up Crystol Energy. So I worked in academia. I was a full-time research fellow at the University of Surrey. I also worked, among others, of course, I also worked in the private sector. Professor Damilora referred to Statoil, which is today known as Equinor. It's a Norwegian national oil company. And I also worked for ENI, or another very large oil company, Italian. And I also worked with governments, so, either through my role as special parliamentary advisor in the UK, or through governmental organizations such as, IMF, World Bank, Commonwealth Secretariat. And I also worked with civil society, and this is where my involvement with the Natural Resource Governance Institute comes from. But I also set up non-for-profit groups such as Access to Women in Energy. So, and then at the end of 2012, I decided to set up Crystol Energy. Having worked with various stakeholders, I felt that I wanted to try something, because you will feel it when there's something in you that doesn't feel satisfied. I mean, all the jobs I did were fantastic and I learned a lot, but there was something in me that was still thirsty. And that aspect was, I felt that, okay, I want to try something new from scratch and see how far it could get. I didn't have a clear business plan. So here I am talking to you about business development, and I did not set up Crystol Energy following the textbook's recommendation of setting up a business. But I had faith in and strong belief in my own skills, having studied, economics, finance. But not only that, I was teaching. When I was studying PhD, I had to teach part-time to sponsor my education, because I didn't have a scholarship then, and my parents could not afford to fund my education. So I was teaching, and I started teaching just basic economics courses to college students. And then I ended up teaching all sorts of management courses, including human resources development, organizational behavior, marketing, I mean, you name it. And that kind of taught me. So because in order to transfer those skills to somebody else, I had to teach myself as well. So I had some basic ingredients that allowed me to set up Crystol Energy. But you see, for any business development, you need to have, in my opinion, a combination of skills. You have the personal skills, and you have, of course, the business skills. Some skills, and now when I look back, I realize that I did not just acquire them when I was studying. A lot of those skills, you acquire them through life. You don't pay too much attention to them. You don't pay too much attention to how they can shape your decisions later on. But actually, when you take a break sometimes and you think back, you realize that actually they played a fundamental role in determining who you are today. For example, growing up in the Civil War, I wouldn't wish it to anyone. But again, in every area, in every problem, excuse me, as my little one tried break into my working room, just saying, let me close the door, excuse me, give me. Apologies about that. I forgot to lock the door. And I'll come back to this one, the challenge from COVID-19. So going back to what I was saying about earlier, the experience from the Civil War. The Civil War teaches you many things. It teaches you to be very, very creative. It teaches you to make spontaneous decision in the light of uncertainty. It teaches you to still learn how to think clearly despite the pressure. And here I have a small anecdote for you, and I mentioned it in an interview that one African magazine did with me recently. And it was a day around Easter, so just before Easter. And in my country, I don't know if you have the same practice, we boil fresh eggs and then we color them. And my mother and I, my brother, my eldest brother, and my father who was driving, were driving back home, and I was carrying proudly, I'm the youngest in my family, a whole box of raw eggs. And just before we reached home, we started seeing bombs falling on a hill opposite us. My father pressed the brakes because my mom and my brother opened the doors hysterically and ran outside to seek refuge. I was about to do the same. This is, herd instinct, where you get influenced by other people's behavior. But what held me back was the fact that I was carrying this a basket of raw eggs. And my father is a great guy because he thinks rationally, even under the biggest pressure. And he called me by my name several times. I still hear his voice till today. And he told me, Carole, hold on a minute. Look at where the bombs are falling. Yes, we can hear them. Yes, we can see them, but we still have time to seek refuge calmly. And he asked me to put the box of eggs on the side and then get out of the car. I managed to close not only my door, but the doors that my mom and my brother left open. And I joined calmly my mom and my brother, but I didn't even go inside the building. I waited outside for my father to join us. And that for me taught me a massive lesson, because today, COVID-19 has been a horrible experience for all of us around the world. I mean, I cannot complain because, I didn't lose any family member, but definitely it had shaken our life quite significantly. And I'll come back to that in terms of the impact on business. But you also have to be able to distance yourself from the pressure. I mean, sometimes when you're running a business, you have deadlines. You have last minute changes. You have maybe a partner, if you brought in a partner who changed their mind and they just left you in the middle of the road. There are lots of pressure down there, especially if it's your own business, and especially if it's the first time you are running this kind of activity. And if you're going to collapse under the first sign of pressure, then you will not get too far. It's not easy, but you should be able to take a step back and then observe the situation quite objectively, and then believe that you can get over the obstacle. When you're in the middle of the storm, it's very difficult to think clearly. And that's why it's important to take a step back. I don't know what can relax you. I don't know what can distract you, for example, but it's important to be able to distance yourself from the problem and look at it objectively and say, okay, how can I find a solution? So I'm part of this different, groups on WhatsApp with colleagues, with former classmates. And one thing that struck my mind is that a lot of the exchanges that we have on these groups is about problems. We talk about problems, but then you say, okay, I know about all these problems. I know there are lots of things going on out there, but let's try to find solutions instead of just saying, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is bad, this is negative, this is disastrous. Oh my God, it's already depressing just by listing all those things. But actually, you can take even the most disastrous situation and try to shift a little bit the mindset to see, is there an opportunity out there? Is there something I can take advantage of and I can bring in my skills to find a solution? The solution may not be pretty obvious, but if you if you regulate your mindset, if you want to reboot your mindset to focus on finding a solution rather than on simply identifying, and okay, we all know the problem, so you have to identify the problem. If you just talk about problem, I doubt you will get too far. So the problem is what you have in front of you, but then you have to, it's like sailing through the fog. You say, okay, I'm lost. I'm not quite able to see where I want to head, but then you continue sailing, you think clearly until you see the other side of the lake, or you see the shore, and then things start to get clearer. So that's another advice I usually give people. With Crystol Energy, when I started Crystol Energy, I was not sure what I want to do with the business. It was just an idea. It was, and it just came out from the fact that I tried working with many stakeholders. And it wasn't because I lost a job. Actually, I walked away from jobs, and I turned down, before I started Crystol Energy, 2 full-time, very prestigious jobs with an international organization. They offered me once and I declined, and they came back to me after a while, and I declined them on both occasions. So it wasn't the shortage of opportunities out there for me. It was mainly because I wanted to try something where I could position myself in an area that allows me to cater for all these stakeholders. So I see myself as a part-time academic. I see myself as a businesswoman working with various stakeholders, from governments to the private sector, financial institutions, NGOs, and also academia. And I can run my non-for-profit group such as Access for Women in Energy. So this is why I set up Crystol Energy. It's partly the curiosity. I didn't know, okay, I learned a lot and I heard a lot about what it would take to start a business, but it was all theoretical. It was all based on other people's experience. And I wanted to know, okay, could I do it? I mean, I knew I had maybe the personal attributes, such as, the tenacity, determination, curiosity, and not being scared of failing, because I knew that, okay, that venture could well fail, because yes, I may be very, very good on the theoretical aspects and big macro picture of economic and analyzing economic outlook, but maybe I would be a terrible businesswoman and I wouldn't be able to manage projects or manage other people. So there were big question marks out there, but I thought, as I always ask myself, what's the worst that could happen? The business would fail, fine. I would go back and pursue one of the previous ventures that I was into, or try to apply for a position either in academia or in the private sector, whatever. So I knew I didn't have a shortage of opportunities out there if I wanted to pursue them. But, I felt that it was worth trying something new. Many people ask me, what did you want to achieve with Crystol Energy? To be honest, I doubt many people would know right from the start what they wanted to achieve exactly, let's say, in the next 10 years. They have an idea. So when you're developing a strategy for a business, you say, okay, I want to get to a certain point. And then you set up the strategy for that, for your business or for your adventure. But then you have to be also open-minded, because throughout that journey, many developments will come along. So for example, when we started Crystol Energy, we wanted to focus on certain areas of business related to energy. But then as we sailed through, we realized that there were other areas that we could branch out into, and they were more interesting for us as a company to focus on than perhaps what we had in mind. It's a little bit like when I wrote the proposal for my PhD. What I submitted as a proposal looks more or less pretty different from what I end up producing and submitting as a PhD at the end, because it's an ongoing learning process whereby sometimes you start with an idea and then it evolves. And it doesn't evolve only because of your experience, but also sometimes technological developments change along the way. For example, I didn't think about shale production, unconventional oil and gas when I entered the energy industry, because the technology became proven only maybe 12, 15 years ago. And that was another area that I had to focus on and educate myself into, and my colleagues. And then and today it occupies a good aspect of the subjects that we cover at Crystol Energy and that we advise on. And that happened because of technological developments and so many other things. Like when I started my work in the energy industry, hardly anyone really talked about climate change. Today, you don't have, you can hardly have actually a discussion on energy without talking about the energy transition and climate change. So, and whatever advice we're giving in the past, we had to today, for example, tailor it to these changes in external conditions. So I can give you more and more examples about how sometimes you cannot just stick to one idea and then go all the way along with it, ignoring major shifts outside, in the external environment. You have to maintain flexibility. Of course, you have to remain loyal to certain vision, to your vision, but even that vision can be modified. I'm not saying that maybe you feel that vision was not really great and then you modified entirely, but you should also keep in mind the possibility of revisiting your strategy and maybe the goals that you want to achieve. And here it takes me to, sorry, there is a lot of background noise coming through. Now it's gone, it's better, thank you. So with respect to the strategy, it's very important to assess, to keep on revisiting your strategy all along, because again, it's an ongoing learning experience. So when you formulate a strategy for your business, if you don't find yourself progressing towards your objectives, and they can be short-term objectives, mid-term or long-term objectives, but regardless of the time frame, if you find yourself that you're not really progressing towards your objectives, then this means that there is an issue with your strategy. So it's worth revisiting your strategy and then modifying it. And then you say, okay, this is not working for me. Let me try perhaps something else and then pursue it. And again, part of these, I learned them through textbooks, from teaching other students, from what I learned at the university. But a lot of that comes from getting my hands dirty. So it's very good to acquire all this knowledge. And look, I strongly believe, I'm somebody who still maintains today a strong link to academia. And even when I was working on a full-time basis with other organizations, I always had a condition before signing a contract that I wanted to maintain my connection to universities, and I wanted to continue teaching at universities. So I strongly believe in the importance of acquiring very good foundations, understanding of the topic, and then later you bring in the experience that builds on that. Many people in my country, in my family, for example, ask me the question, why did you bother to do a PhD? Why did you bother to do a master's degree? At the end, you could have learned all these and when you go and work. Maybe. But I think I did not just learn. When you go and you pursue your education, you're not just learning the topic. You're learning some skills, you're developing skills such as analytical skills that will help you to make a better judgment when you're running a business. And that's what distinguishes, for example, one true expert from the other. And in energy, you have to be careful. There are lots of people out there who claim expertise. And that's something it always, and I'm not, arguing that you should not, you cannot express an opinion. But there is a difference between simply reading headline news and then going on stage today on Zoom, on these internet platforms, and then expressing your view. And I can tell, for example, who learned those just by scanning the headline news, and somebody who really has the strong foundations, who studied it hard, who acquired the in-depth knowledge of what it means to analyze a certain topic, what it means to really look at the data carefully and studying it and identifying trends, identifying relationships, and you will feel it in their outcomes, in their analysis. So that's one thing when we are taking people on board at Crystol Energy, that plays a very important role. The knowledge, the degree achieved, and the kind of skills achieved while pursuing that degree. So this is why I told you earlier, I'm a big believer and a strong supporter of academic institutions, and I hope I will be able to support them a long way. You know, as long as I have energy and time to give, I will definitely do that. Another important skill that I realized that running a business like Crystol Energy requires is the people skills. And that is, I'm not quite sure if this is something that you learn only, or you can acquire at universities, or by reading some textbooks on, human resource management, for instance, or management in general. Or it also requires a lot of certain personal attributes. I mean, a few days ago, on Sunday, actually yesterday, it was Mother's Day in Lebanon. And I find being a mother, I became a mother 2 years ago. And I promise you, I think mothers, they have fantastic people skills, because dealing with currently happening in Nigeria or not. But teaching also helped me a lot to develop my people skills, because teaching, here you are at the university, you go and you have 2 hours, 50 minutes each, and there is a break, 10 minutes in between. And you have to talk to an audience who can be very, very critical and ask very unpredictable questions. And you have to keep them interested in, and you cannot deliver everything in one session. So you have to keep their interest over, let's say, 11 weeks or 12 weeks, sometimes, depending on the term of your university. And that helped a lot in terms of understanding the span attention of other people. Here, I know that using the computer has allowed us to maintain this kind of communication and reach throughout the pandemic, but I doubt it would really replace to a big extent, for example, face-to-face interaction or personal interaction, because the body language is another important aspect that you want to develop an understanding of, especially when you're doing some negotiations. And there are lots of online courses out there about how you develop your negotiation skills. The body language plays a role, the eye contact plays a role, the facial expression plays a role in terms of the mood and the sentiment in the room. But people skills is not just about just understanding and communicating others. It's about also motivating them. You have the vision when you start your business. You have your own passion and ambition. Other people may not share that with you, especially if you cannot explain it to them properly. So you have to also, as a leader, as a business leader, you have to be able to motivate them to come along with you, to share with you the vision, and to support you in achieving that. And here you have to also act responsibly as a leader, because you have a certain influence over others. And that's why I always recommend others and I tell them, use it wisely. So when you are promoting certain thoughts and ideas, just think about the impact of your ideas on other people's behavior. So there's definitely the people angle to take in consideration. I'm not saying that you will get on well with everybody you want to do business with. I had terrible experiences, but ironically, some of the people that I get on very well with are not actually best friends, are people who think completely differently from me, who challenge my own thinking. So you should be able to distinguish between somebody talking to you in a professional way and then taking things personally. So again, there is a kind of detachment here that you should be able to look at the situation objectively. You should also be open to other ideas that may conflict entirely with your initial idea. And you should be willing to revisit that idea of yours and think, okay, maybe I did not take that aspect into consideration. Maybe it's worth taking another person's perspective into consideration. I'm not saying you cannot do business with friends. Of course, you find friends that did wonderfully later on, but I wouldn't take it as a main criteria to set up a business if you want to go down the route of partnership. And again, I go back to the importance of maintaining an objective assessment of people and of the situation. The other thing you have to ask yourself is, I mentioned earlier, for example, the issue of risk-taking. Risk-taking does not mean you go and you jump off the cliff without looking at where you're heading, or just endangering your life or endangering your business and actually the future of people who work with you. But you may be able to allow yourself, for example, to try uncharted territories, something that you haven't really dealt with before. And that, in my opinion, is healthy. I'm not saying it works for everyone. And you find two people, I mean, me and my brothers, I have two older brothers, and we are entirely different. One of them is super risk averse, is perhaps on the one extreme side of the spectrum, and on the other side of the spectrum, even though we were raised under the same values by the same parents and we had the same experiences, but we turned out to be very different in terms of our interest in risk. The way I look at it, I'm not saying that he is wrong or other people, risk cautious, risk averse people are wrong, but let me tell you how I see the risk-taking aspect, especially when you are setting up a business and running it. And again, it depends on where you want to take that business. You will have many cases where you're going to fail, but I strongly believe that you learn mainly from your own failures. And risk-taking involves a certain ability to accept that it's okay to fail. Of course, you cannot lose everything. You have to take to be very careful in terms of how much, what is the kind of degree of risk that you want to take, and what is the impact on your business and on your colleagues and other people involved in this. But it's also a healthy exercise, because you stretch your limits. You go out of your comfort zone. And that's very important for business development, for expanding and growing your business into a new area, especially when conditions change and you want to change the portfolio of activity, or you want to widen the range of activities that you are working on. So here is another aspect, which is stretching your abilities, develop new skills, and don't be hesitant to try something new. You may like it, you may dislike it, you may find that you are actually excellent in doing something new, but you wouldn't be able to tell unless you try. And if you are scared of failing, I always ask myself, I say, again, what's the worst that can happen? And if the worst scenario is manageable, it's not about how others see you, it's about how you see yourself more than anything, then I would strongly advise you to do that. Otherwise, you're going to stall, and stalling is not really good if you want to grow your business, if you want to develop your skills and widen your reach. Anyway, so I mentioned a lot about the interplay between business skills and personal skills. I have to also add one more angle before I move on to the kind of challenges that COVID-19 has brought to business, all businesses alike, particularly businesses like mine. But let me add an important aspect, and I know people talk about it a lot today. And here, allow me to highlight something which is, a gender issue, for example, the importance of mentorship. There's a lot happening out there today, and people recognize the important role that mentors play in supporting other people, especially younger generation, and particularly in the area of supporting female talent and their development in various industries, particularly in the energy industry. And I highlight that because in the energy industry, the role of women is meager. It's shocking to say that the oil industry is more than 100 years old, and yet the number of female CEO at the major oil and gas companies is just maybe around 2%, and women in senior positions is around 17%, And even at entry level, you're talking about less than 25%. So this is quite shocking for somebody like me who has been in this industry for more than 20 years. And more importantly, it's shocking because it's a business that has been around for more than 100 years. And we're still talking today about empowering women as if the industry is brand new. But at least it's not too late, and this is something that should be pursued. But anyway, to go back to my point about mentorship, as a woman in the energy industry, particularly in the oil and gas industry, I faced many hurdles and many challenges. I'm not going to pinpoint at who did what to me. It's not. I'm not here. I don't want to highlight that this is not productive for anyone. But even if I go back to my family, there was always this kind of discrimination between the boy and the girl in the family. So I did not accept it. I accept it exists. I did not accept it, and I did not give in. And that was actually, again, I go back to what I said in my earlier remarks. When you look at a problem, you want to see, okay, you acknowledge the problem, but most importantly, you try to find the solution. So I acknowledged there was a problem in my culture's thinking, where there was the boy was given more importance, a more favorable treatment than the girl, but I had to do something about it. And this is where I realized that maybe if I stayed in Lebanon, my horizon will be constrained by these cultural beliefs. So I had to explore something new. And I'm actually grateful for the fact that I've faced that problem, because that pushed me to move to the UK in '98, pursue my education. Remember what I said earlier, that I wanted to study only 1 year in the UK. And then I enrolled really entirely unplanned into a PhD program. And I pursued my career, and I had the whole world opening in front of me. So this is really, I think, the best I can use in terms of example to illustrate how you can look beyond the problem and try to find a solution, a way beyond, because you will keep on finding these kind of hurdles all along. So either you stop there and then you start saying, oh my God, what am I going to do? This is disastrous. Or you stand on your feet and they try to say, okay, how can I get over that particular problem? And this is very important, especially if you are leading an organization, especially if you want to inspire other people around you and motivate them. Again, it goes back to the mindset, perhaps more than anything else. So I want to go to the issue, just to conclude on the issue of mentorship. I didn't look for a specific mentor, so I didn't call any agencies, or I didn't ask the people who hired me for mentors. I was lucky enough to find maybe one or two people who played an important role, not in telling me what to do, but they shared with me. I mean, one of them is perhaps, is much older than me, and he has lots of experience, he has lots of wisdom, and I learned a lot from his advice, from his own experience. And then I applied it in my own way. So it's not that I took other people's advice and I followed it religiously, but I listened to their experiences, I listened to their successes, I listened to their failures, and then, okay, I deducted lessons I could apply in my own pursuit. So that played also an important role. Anyway, so that perhaps gives you a better taste of where I come from, of my background, personal skills, business skills, and Crystol Energy. And if you ask me how far I want to take Crystol Energy, I tell you the sky is the limit. I mean, we started out of nowhere. We're still small compared to many companies out there, but I'm so proud of the projects that we have dealt with, of how clients have been coming to us without us going and knocking on anybody's door. We had people coming to us, how our reputation has spread all around the world, and not just, and really we started from nothing. And actually, we didn't have any capital injected in the company. So that's another thing that maybe I think, okay, if I invested some capital in the company, it would have grown faster, but we secured a contract from day one when we started the business. So that helped. Let me now quickly, because I'm conscious of time, I want to come to today's challenge imposed by COVID-19. One of the main challenges, of course, if you've been following what's been happening in energy markets, last year was a disastrous year in terms of the collapse in oil prices, the volatility that businesses have faced all around the world. Governments, corporates, households, they are all indebted, and that will not disappear overnight. So even if the pandemic, coronavirus pandemic, comes under control, I fear that there are some structural scars that will stay with us for several years to come. So that's something that we have to keep in mind when we're thinking about the future. So yes, we're all pinning our hopes on the success of the vaccination and the rollout, not just in some places in Europe and in North America, but also all around the world, particularly in the developing countries. But there are some structural problems that will have lasting impacts, at least for the next 3-4 years, and we have to be able to adjust and be better prepared for them. But apart from the uncertainty and the volatility, again, we look at the bright side. That imagine that COVID-19 would have happened in the pre-digital age. I mean, it would have been really a big disaster on a personal level and on a business level. But thanks to our familiarity already with Skype, for example, I mean, Zoom, I have to admit, I was not really that familiar with Zoom before the pandemic. But I think what the coronavirus crisis has brought, I mean, we already had digitalization, but it has accelerated the digitalization trend. And you see more and more people embracing digitalization at a much faster rate than they had before. And in the energy industry, this is more so than before. In education, for me, it wasn't a big change because I gave a lot of training online. I mean, for several reasons. Some of them because we couldn't fit a busy schedule between us and the client. And other cases where we had to meet a tight budget from the client. So we thought, okay, let's reduce an important aspect of the cost that is a travel cost and the per diem and the hotel and you name it, and we just do it online. And then the third one, another reason I can think of is personally imposed moratorium because I didn't want to travel, for example, during the pregnancy. So I ended up doing lots of things online. So for me personally and for Crystol Energy, we already had the experience of doing things online. However, the challenge that I think not just us, but many companies out there are going to face all along, and I would be happy to share with you a report that we will be publishing very soon, maybe this week or next, but I will share it with Professor Babalola and then he can circulate it among you, is the fact that digitalization also comes with a big threat. That is cybersecurity. We don't think about it a lot. Actually, we did a survey and it was amazing that everybody in the survey among business leaders all around the world, throughout the whole supply chain for energy, all said without any without any exceptions saying otherwise, that digitalization plays a very, very important role for their business. However, when we gave them a list of concerns for the next 5 years or 10 years, cybersecurity or cyber threats came in the bottom concerns. So we told them to pick various answers and really hardly anyone thought of cybersecurity. So there is a kind of mismatch today between where we're heading and the technology we're adopting. So technology is a fantastic thing to have, but we also have to be aware of the risks that technology brings along. The problem is that people don't talk about cyber attacks when they face them. So there's a problem of communication here. In my business, the conventional oil and gas and energy business, we encourage government, especially with organizations such as the Natural Resource Governance Institute. We tell organizations, governments, and private sector to embrace transparency, and we really focus on the benefits of transparency. But actually, when you look at certain applications, I mentioned, for example, here, cybersecurity, companies do face cyber attacks a lot, but hardly anyone talks about it. And this is a problem by itself because you need different organizations to share their experience so that the specialists learn how to tackle that problem more effectively and more efficiently. And I hope that will change. So that's going to be a big challenge. So COVID-19 has been a challenge by itself. It brought opportunities such as the adoption of digitalization, but it's also bringing along other threats that we were not aware of in the past. But I'm a strong believer that we can adapt as long as you keep an open mind. And I use this example, I'm going to stop shortly so I leave time for questions, but I use this example to show you how you need to maintain an open mind. So if you start again with a certain idea, pursue it, but you have to be aware of various developments taking place around you. And that may help you to steer the business in the right direction in the longer term. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of patience. And most importantly, my advice to you is always believe in yourself. You will face lots of discrimination out there. I'm not talking only about gender discrimination, just to give you a very, very small example. Unfortunately, many people out there, they like big name tags. Conference organizers in the past, for example, they want to get people based, for example, on the organization that they represent much more than on their interpersonal skills or their qualifications. This is changing. And I think also, again, COVID-19 is changing that, because when I look at the various events organized online, I see a more colorful participation across the board, a more diverse participation than I used to see when we were attending conferences in person. So that's something else. But this takes me to, just to go back to my point about the importance of never stopping believing in yourself, because you will face lots of difficulties. You will face lots of, instances where you feel you were treated unfairly. But at the end, take those experiences as positive experiences that will allow you to get better, and don't lose sight of your target and your objective. And I want to conclude with something, a quote, because again, in that interview I mentioned earlier that I gave to the African Oil Report, the interviewer asked me about a famous quote that have inspired my journey. And I'll never forget when I read that quote. It was actually not for a business, but more for an army. And I fell in love with it, because for me, that was really inspirational. And I repeat it for you. It says, "The difficult we do immediately. The impossible takes a little longer." So this is something for me that I keep close to my heart. Of course, there are lots of inspirational quotes out there, but just keep in mind that whatever looks impossible, it takes a little bit of effort and it becomes possible. And thank you very much for listening and for your patience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carole, for the wonderful and inspiring remarks. I think you've set a wonderful tone for us, and you've made a lot of comments that we have to reflect on. I think each and every point you touched upon are so important in terms of building a successful business. The zeal required, the tenacity, as well as the determination required to hold on, to hang in there, and be the best. I think these are all remarkable comments, and we'll just open it up now for questions. And I want to invite everyone to feel free to either type in your questions in the comment box, or you can use the hand raising feature to indicate that you want to speak, and then I would call on you to give your comments. While we do that, since I have the mic, I better maybe start with two questions that came to mind. I guess it was Warren Buffett that said, every millionaire you see has at least 7 sources of income, 7 streams of income at the same time. And one key question, of course, I know you wouldn't tell us if you're a millionaire or not, but one key question that comes from what you've been describing, which is doing a lot of things and multitasking and all of that, is how do you manage that transition, especially for some of us in the room that are academics now looking to say, okay, can I also be interested in research, or can I also be interested in agriculture or things like that? How was the transition for you in terms of managing multiple things at the same time and still being able to deliver maximum results in all of them? That's question number one. Question number two is, you've successfully built a global brand, both in terms of your own personal recognition and in terms of your business being, going beyond just Lebanon or beyond just the United Kingdom. You've grown a successful brand received awards in Tunisia and in other parts of the world. How do you transform a local business to a global business? How do you move an idea from local conceptualization to global recognition? And how do you, because the journey of 1,000 miles, they say, starts with a single step. How do you move from that single step to build a globally recognized, globally successful and impactful business? I think I better stop there and allow you to answer those two, after which I would allow everyone else to comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, oh, yeah, I'm on mute. I mean, I can maybe perhaps answer both questions in one, because they are interlinked. And I mean, in terms of managing different things and then building a global brand, first of all, for managing different things, the first thing that came to my mind is complementarity. So you will have, in my area for academia, I worked on certain areas. For example, I specialized while doing my PhD in petroleum taxation, petroleum fiscal regimes. And of course, for that, you develop lots of skills, including developing financial models, and become very computer literate, especially with Excel, for example. But then when I started my career, so I used that to establish a name in my area. So I built on that strength. As soon as I finished my PhD, I already had several papers published, but I also converted my PhD in a book, which you mentioned earlier in your kind introduction. That already gave me a certain support, if you want, or something to build on. I spoke a lot at conferences, and I didn't shy away from industry events. I remember there were lots of events in the industry whereby I was the only non-industry person speaking. And the same thing, there were lots of events where I was the only female perhaps speaking. So I started with that package, from the fiscal regimes, from the core understanding of financial aspect. And then I branched it out to areas that would complement those. For example, the missions I did with the IMF, yes, they work on, for example, designing the fiscal regime for oil and gas, but also requires a good understanding of the whole institutional framework. So you branch out into understanding the legislation, the regulations, the contracts, etc. Another thing that comes to my mind is the love for writing. And I'm not going to tell you about my various income stream or whether I'm a millionaire or not. Maybe one day, if I become president, like President Trump, people will be chasing me to publish, but it's all anyway out there, nothing to hide. But I had a backup plan. So when I started Crystol Energy, I knew that if I was not going to succeed, then I could always still get some income from my writing, because I always loved writing since I was at school. And I built a lot on that when I was doing my higher education and when I was a research fellow at the university. And throughout even when I joined ENI and Statoil, I was writing a lot. And ENI, I mean, I never wrote speeches before except my own speeches, but I was writing the speeches of the CEO, of the chairman in the company. And again, it's because people realized that I had that skill, the skill of writing. And when I write, I like to write to a general audience. And that's another reason why perhaps I did not stick 100% to academia, because I didn't want to write only for academics like me. I wanted to write to a wider audience because I wanted my message to reach the government people. I wanted my message to reach, the person in the street, the average person in the street. I wanted to write in a way that if my mother would read my article, she would understand without losing the academic robustness behind the argument. So people discovered that, and I built on that. And that's one thing with Crystol Energy. I felt, okay, if the business doesn't take off, I can always go back and build on all those skills on my network as well. So that's another thing I developed. I remember when I was doing a PhD, I was one of the very, very few students. I don't want to say the only one in case my memory fails me, but I was one of the very few students who did not stay in the office all the time. I was going out there, attending events, making myself noticed, interacting with other people, exchanging my ideas with other people. And this again goes into stretching yourself and going beyond your comfort zone. And that's why it was very easy for me. As soon as I finished my PhD, I received a job offer. So I didn't have to look hard to find a job. So again, you can do a lot, and networking, I think, is still helping me today. It helped Crystol Energy because, as I said earlier, we started the business with a contract already with us for a client, and that contract did not happen suddenly because we put online that we Crystol Energy, but they heard of us from before. They knew me, they knew my colleagues, and they said, okay, we would like to hire you for this kind of service. So you build the expertise, you build the credibility, and it's like riding a carriage with several horses at the same time. So you don't focus on one aspect, you try to branch out, but you have to ensure complementarity, because I cannot start talking about agriculture economics suddenly. I'm not an expert in that. So I stick into my area, but I widen the reach.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much for those comments. Anyone with a question can now, you can use your, like I said, you can type in your question, or you can use the reaction or hand raising feature on the app to ask any question that you have. Go ahead, Femi A, please.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very happy with the presentation. At work with many organizations, Korea, telecom, oil and gas, and banking. What I actually want to ask is on networking. When you want to bridge the gap between the private sector and the university, is always very difficult. Like everyone wants to just stay on his or our own line. How do we bridge this gap based on your own experience? How do we bridge it, especially in Nigeria, where if you are coming from the academic, people from the private sector feels that you cannot fit in. And if you are coming from the private sector, the academics are also thinking you cannot fit in. How do we quickly bridge that gap? Thank you.
Sorry, so just to clarify, that to bridge the gap between academia and what I missed on the first part of the question?
Yes. I said, how do we bridge that interaction, networking, and collaboration?
Right. I mean, today, perhaps you have a much better opportunity than before, because you have a lot happening online. And to be honest, I don't know when we can go back to in-person meeting. So you can use those platforms to reach out to people. When I say to reach out to people, not just to sit there and listen, but there are lots of speakers out there. And if you want to establish, for example, connection with them, you can always find them on social media and send them a nice message saying, you know, I was delighted to listen to your presentation, and I would like to get your view on XYZ. So I think today there's a lot you can do using the existing technologies to reach out to people, whether other academics or other in the private sector. Look, I tell you, I receive lots of messages on social media. I may not respond straight away, and I know I take time. Sometimes I even respond after several months, but I do respond. However, I respond to messages which are very specific. I tell you an example. I had somebody reaching out to me recently, 10 days ago. And it was a lady from the Middle East, from Lebanon. And then she wanted me to help her in finding any job. I mean, sorry, if I'm getting a lot of messages in a day, I'm not going to spend time answering such a question. Not only that, 1 week later, she sent me a very aggressive message telling me how I failed her as a woman, and she thought that I was from Lebanon and I could have helped her, but I was her biggest disappointment, blah, blah, blah. Then, I had to answer, but not to help her, but just to put her in the right place and to explain to her what was the problem with her message, that her message was too general. And she thought that I had nothing to do but to answer this kind of find me any job. You see, so if you want to reach out to people, you have to appreciate that they have busy schedules, that they have, I mean, you see me, I'm sitting here, and my daughter was supposed to go to a kindergarten. I left her with her father, and I think they are still fighting. That's why I will have to leave at 5:30, if you don't mind, in a few minutes. So people, I mean, so you have to appreciate that people also have other things to do. And therefore, if you want to increase the chance of people interacting with you, you have to find a bridge between your interest and their interest. So you have to find something in common that you two can establish a link. It doesn't succeed all the time. I remember I mentioned earlier the mentor I had, and he told me something. He said, out of 100 doors you're going to knock on, one of them will open. So keep on trying, and then don't give up, persevere. That's why I said, tenacity, determination, but make sure when you reach out to other people, you are very specific with your request, and then you build on something that you two have in common. Because if you just, another example, people send me messages, they say, tell us about Crystol Energy. And I say, go on the website. Or they tell me, what does Crystol Energy do? On LinkedIn, for example, I give them the link of the company, you see? So usually you should have to do a little bit of homework to take the first step, because people appreciate the effort. I learned something about writing. So something that is written without pleasure is read without pleasure. And the same thing when you reach out to people, if you don't do some minimum background to understand the area of work of those people, the company, what they cover. For example, on Crystol Energy, we put a lot on the website. So maybe you can pick up one area and say, okay, I found that Crystol Energy is focusing on this. I do this part. Maybe we can have a chat to discuss, or please find attached a commentary I did on that. So there is a lot you can do to improve your chances of your message being reciprocated or answered.
Well, thank you very much for the response. I see that you'd have to leave in the next 3 minutes, so I'll probably just call on the Vice Chancellor.
Can I? Sorry, excuse me. I just want to add one more thing, because this will be my concluding remark before I leave you. Sorry for interrupting, because it just crossed my mind. Also, you don't always go to others. You can do something and make others come to you. Publishing, speaking, and today you see how people use social platforms for that. So what I mentioned earlier was you going to others, reaching out. But for example, when I started Access Women in Energy, I had in mind, the idea of promoting women, and we set up this group to bring men and women together to interact. And we've been doing lots of events, and people now come to us and ask for membership. So you can think of all creative way to establish this kind of reach to other organizations and other people. So you go to them, but you also think about bringing them to you. Sorry for interrupting, but that was my concluding remark. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. So think of what you can do that will be a magnet to others to come to you, rather than the other way around all the time. Thank you very much. I'll call on the Vice Chancellor to please give the remarks. Is the Vice Chancellor still on with us? Professor Ogunusi, do you know? Well,
okay, sir. The Vice Chancellor is not on seat, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
all right. Sir. Well, I will call on the director of the ODL then to give our vote of thanks to the speaker. Yes, Professor Ogunusi, over to you, please. I think Professor Ogunusi is not there, or I can see she's here. Maybe we can't hear you though, Professor Ogunusi. Well, I'll take the honor and pleasure of doing it then. Well, I've already expressed our sincere thanks and gratitude to you, Dr. Carole Nakhle, for taking time out of a very busy schedule to join us and to be part of this discussion. I think you've given us a lot of food for thought for the week as we explore these issues of starting a business, running a business, marketing a business, and building a global brand. So thank you very much. On behalf of myself and on behalf of the management and staff of Babalola University in Ado-Ekiti, Nigeria's fastest growing private university, one of Africa's fastest growing universities. It is our pleasure to always welcome you. We hope you would find time to visit us in Nigeria when the pandemic is over, and we can show you some of the Nigerian hospitality. I think, as we say in Arabic, shukran kazilan, and have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to staying in touch. Thank you so much. Thank you.